Sweat dripped down my neck as the locker room door clicked shut, trapping me with St. Jude's most ruthless alpha. One clumsy slip, a brush of my scent gland against his jaw, and my quiet life ended. Nicholas Russo wasn't just angry. He was completely dangerously obsessed. Nobody tells you how terrifying it is to be a late-blooming Omega in a private school run by legacy alphas. At St. Jude's Academy, biology wasn't just a science class. It was a rigid, unforgiving social hierarchy. I was Harper Jane, a scholarship student who had managed to fly under the radar for 3 years by masquerading as a beta. My doctor, Dr. Orris, down at the community clinic, had prescribed me a heavy dose of medical-grade suppressants. They were cheap, tasted like battery acid, and gave me migraines, but they kept my scent completely muted. Until the second Tuesday of October. There had been a manufacturing recall on my specific brand of suppressants. By the time I realized my backup pills were expired, the dull, throbbing ache at the base of my spine had already begun. It was the precursor to a heat flash. I just needed to make it through one more period, Coach Miller's physical education class, before I could catch the bus back to my apartment and lock myself in my room. But PE was a disaster. Coach Miller, a loud-mouthed beta, who took his job way too seriously, ordered us to do suicide sprints across the gymnasium. With every sprint, my body temperature spiked. My skin felt like it was on fire, and that familiar, terrifying sweetness, a scent like crushed cedar and warm honey, started to seep through my pores. I panicked. Muttering an excuse about feeling nauseous, I bolted from the gym before Miller could argue. I didn't head for the nurse's office. Nurse Higgins was a notorious gossip, and if she logged me as an Omega, the whole school would know by third period. Instead, I ducked into the old decommissioned equipment room behind the bleachers. It was a dusty, windowless space filled with deflated basketballs and broken tackling dummies. It was my designated safe haven. Except it wasn't empty. Leaning against a stack of gym mats in the far corner was Nicholas Russo. My blood ran cold. Everyone at St. Jude's knew to avoid Nicholas. He was an alpha from a wealthy, notoriously private family that owned half the real estate in the city. He was built like a heavyweight fighter, standing at 6'3", with piercing dark eyes that always looked violently bored. Rumor had it he had broken a senior alpha's jaw in 3 places last year over a simple territory dispute. Nicholas didn't just demand respect. He extracted it. He was territorial, aggressive, and fiercely solitary. He looked up as I stumbled in his heavy brow furrowing. He was holding a lit cigarette, the smoke curling around his messy dark hair. "Get out!" His voice was a low, guttural rumble that vibrated right through my chest, triggering every single submissive instinct I had spent years burying. "I'm sorry, I just need a minute." I gasped, clutching my burning chest. My vision was swimming. The heat flash was hitting me harder than I anticipated, disorienting me. My knees buckled. I didn't mean to fall toward him. I was just trying to grab the edge of a metal shelf to steady myself, but my sweaty palm slipped. I pitched forward into the darkness. Nicholas moved with terrifying speed. He dropped his cigarette and caught me before I could crack my skull on the concrete floor. His large, calloused hands gripped my waist, hauling me up against his solid chest. The moment my body collided with his, the sheer overwhelming scent of him, sharp ozone, dark coffee, and raw alpha dominance hit my senses like a freight train. My Omega biology short-circuited. Driven by blind panic and a sudden primal surge of heat-induced delirium, I thrashed against him. As I struggled to push away, my neck snapped back, and the sensitive scent gland on my pulse point dragged aggressively against his jawline and the collar of his uniform shirt. It wasn't just a brush, it was a friction burn of concentrated pheromones. I gasped, freezing in terror. In the Omegaverse scent marking, an alpha without their explicit consent was the ultimate taboo. It was an act of possession, a claiming that triggered violent, territorial rage in unbonded alphas. It was a death wish. Nicholas went completely rigid. His hands tightened on my waist, his fingers digging into my ribs hard enough to bruise. He slowly lowered his head, burying his nose into the collar of his own shirt, where my scent now clung to the fabric. I watched in absolute horror as his pupils blew wide, swallowing his dark irises, until his eyes were entirely black. A low, vibrating growl started deep in his chest, a sound so primal it made my teeth rattle. He didn't push me away. He didn't yell. He just stared down at me, his breathing turning heavy, his nostrils flaring as he took in the heavy, intoxicating aroma of my cedar and honey scent mixed with his own. "You," he rasped his voice, dropping an octave sounding incredibly raw. I didn't wait to hear the rest. Adrenaline overrode my heat flash. I shoved my hands against his chest, breaking his grip with the element of surprise, and I ran. I burst out of the equipment room, sprinted across the empty hallway, and didn't stop until I had locked myself inside a stall in the furthest bathroom on the 3rd floor. I sat on the cold tile, shaking violently, waiting for Nicholas Russo to kick the door down and rip me apart for daring to mark him. But he never came. I thought I had escaped. I thought it was over. I was so incredibly wrong. For 3 days, I lived in a state of suffocating paranoia. I managed to get a rush order of my suppressants from a different pharmacy, masking my scent entirely once again. I went back to being Harper, the invisible beta. But St. Jude's felt different. The air was thicker, heavier. It started with small things. On Wednesday, I was sitting in the cafeteria with my only friend, Toby. Toby was a cheerful beta who talked endlessly about his chaotic family. I was trying to focus on my sandwich when the ambient chatter in the dining hall suddenly died down. I looked up. Nicholas Russo had entered the room. He bypassed the VIP tables where the elite alphas usually sat and walked straight down the center aisle. He stopped directly behind my chair. I froze my heart, hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I could feel the heat radiating off his body. He didn't look at me. He just stood there for 10 agonizing seconds, staring down Toby, until Toby mumbled an excuse, grabbed his tray, and practically sprinted away. Only then did Nicholas move on. On Thursday, I found Nicholas leaning against the lockers outside my AP chemistry class. Mrs. Gable, the strictest teacher in school, completely ignored him as he stood there. What terrified me most wasn't that he was stalking me. It was what he was wearing. It was the same uniform jacket from the equipment room, the one I had accidentally rubbed my gland against. He hadn't washed it. In fact, as I scurried past him with my head down, I saw him subtly tilt his chin, resting his jaw against the collar, inhaling deeply. A shiver of pure dread raced down my spine. Alphas were notoriously hygienic. Wearing unwashed clothes was unheard of, unless they were intentionally preserving a mate's scent. By Friday, my anxiety was suffocating. He was systematically cutting off my escape routes. He intimidated my lab partners into switching seats, so the desk next to me was empty. He parked his matte black SUV directly next to my beat-up sedan in the parking lot. He never spoke to me, never touched me, but his presence was a heavy, suffocating blanket that wrapped around my every waking moment. The climax arrived on Friday afternoon. I had stayed late in the library archives to finish a history paper. The archives were located in the basement, a maze of towering bookshelves and dusty microfiche machines. It was dead silent. I was reaching for a textbook on the top shelf when the lights at the end of the aisle clicked off. I gasped, dropping my pen. Footsteps echoed in the gloom. Slow, heavy, deliberate boots against the hardwood floor. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. From the shadows, Nicholas emerged. He looked disheveled, a dangerous edge to his usually stoic expression. His tie was pulled loose, and his eyes were locked onto me with a predatory intensity that made my knees weak. "I tried to give you time, Harper," Nicholas said, his voice a dark, velvety rumble that echoed in the quiet aisle. It was the first time I had ever heard him say my name, and the sound of it on his tongue felt terrifyingly intimate. I tried to let the scent fade. I waited. "But you doused yourself in those chemical suppressants again, didn't you? You smell like sterile hospital wards and chalk. It's driving me out of my mind." I backed up until my shoulder blades hit the bookshelf. "Nicholas, please. It was an accident. I swear. I was having a heat flash. I tripped. I never meant to mark you. Just wash the jacket. Please. I'll pay for the dry cleaning." Nicholas stepped into my personal space, towering over me. The ozone and coffee scent of his alpha pheromones flared thick and suffocating, commanding my omega nature to submit. "Wash it," he repeated, a dark, humorless chuckle escaping his chest. He slammed one hand against the bookshelf, right next to my head, trapping me. "Do you have any idea what you did, Harper? You imprinted on me. An unbonded omega in preheat, rubbing their distress pheromones directly into my bloodstream. My biology doesn't care that it was an accident. My instincts don't know the difference." He leaned in closer, his nose brushing against my jawline, right over my dormant scent gland. I squeezed my eyes shut, trembling so hard I could barely stand. "For 3 days I haven't slept," Nicholas whispered, his breath hot against my skin. "Every time I close my eyes, I smell cedar and honey. Every time another alpha even looks at you in the hallway, my brain tells me I need to tear their throat out. You made me feral, Harper. You claimed a territorial alpha, and then you ran." "I'm sorry," I choked out, tears finally spilling over my eyelashes. "What do you want from me?" Nicholas's hand moved from the bookshelf, his large fingers, gently but firmly, wrapping around the back of my neck. His thumb stroked the sensitive skin just above my collar. "I want to sleep," he said, his voice dropping into a rough, desperate growl. "And my instincts won't let me rest until the omega that marked me is safely locked inside my den. You're coming with me." "What? No, Nicholas. You can't." "I can." He interrupted, his grip tightening just enough to be a warning. "And I will. You can walk out to my car willingly, or I can throw you over my shoulder and carry you out. But you aren't going back to your apartment tonight, Harper. You're coming home with me. Until my head is on straight, you don't leave my sight. You don't leave my bed." Panic clawed at my throat. I tried to push him away, but it was like shoving a brick wall. He effortlessly caught both of my wrists in one hand, pinning them against his chest. "Don't fight me right now," he warned, his eyes flashing pitch black again. "My control is hanging by a thread. Walk." Realizing the terrifying truth that he was dead serious and completely at the mercy of his feral instincts, I had no choice. Trembling, I let the most feared alpha at Saint. Judes dragged me out of the library and into the passenger seat of his SUV. As the locks clicked shut, sealing me inside with him, I realized my quiet, invisible life was over. I was now the captive of the monster I had accidentally claimed. Rain lashed against the tinted glass of Nicholas's SUV as we descended into the subterranean parking fortress of the Russo family's downtown high-rise. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I was trapped. The sprawling penthouse we entered was a cold architectural marvel of steel, glass, and dark marble. It felt less like a home and more like a high-altitude prison. Nicholas didn't drag me or use force once we were inside. Instead, his demeanor shifted into something far more unnerving, obsessive, hyper-focused domesticity. He locked the heavy oak door, engaged the biometric security system, and turned to me. His chest heaved as he finally breathed in the air of his own territory, now laced with my suppressed, panicked scent. "Take your shoes off," Nicholas instructed, his voice lower, the dangerous edge slightly blunted by the safety of his den. "Are you hungry, thirsty? You're shaking, Harper." I backed away until my calves hit a plush, charcoal-grey sofa. "I want to go home, Nicholas. You can't just kidnap me. This is insane. Tomorrow is Monday. People will notice I'm missing. I've already emailed the school administration. We both have a severe case of the flu. Excused absences for the entire week," he replied smoothly, stripping off his suit jacket, the very jacket carrying my scent, and carefully draping it over a chair. "As for your apartment, I had a security team clear it out. Your essentials are in the guest bedroom. You aren't going back there." "You cleared out my apartment?" I shrieked, the sheer audacity of his wealth and power finally sinking in. Nicholas stepped closer, and I flinched. But he just reached out his large, warm palms, cupping my face. His thumbs gently brushed my cheekbones. "You don't understand, Harper. My father, Arthur Rousseau, has eyes everywhere. If he finds out an unbonded, untracked Omega marked me, he won't just expel you. He will ruin your life. He's been trying to force a corporate bonding contract between me and Cecilia Hastings for 2 years. By accidentally claiming me, you painted a target on your back. I brought you here because my penthouse is the only place in the city my father's security cannot breach." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about an alpha's feral instincts. It was about survival. For the next 48 hours, the penthouse became my gilded cage. Nicholas was a terrifyingly attentive captor. He cooked for me, forcing me to eat nutrient-dense meals. He patrolled the perimeter of the apartment restlessly. But the most shocking twist came on Sunday night. My body began to violently reject the cheap suppressants I had been taking for years. Without my daily dose, which Nicholas had confiscated and flushed down the toilet, claiming the heavy metals were destroying my liver, I crashed into severe withdrawal. Fever spiked, my joints ached, and my suppressed cedar and honey scent exploded into the penthouse, thick and suffocating. I was curled into a miserable ball on the guest bed, shivering violently. Nicholas entered the room, his eyes dilated, completely black. The sheer volume of my pheromones was pushing him to the brink. In the Omegaverse, an alpha exposed to an omega in preheat distress usually loses all rational thought. But Nicholas fought it. Sweating, his jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth would shatter, he didn't attack me. Instead, he started gathering things: blankets from the linen closet, his own soft cashmere sweaters, silk pillows from the master bedroom. He brought them to my bed, and with trembling hands began to build a nest. It was a deeply instinctual, intimate act, usually reserved for Omegas. Seeing a 6'3", terrifyingly dominant alpha meticulously arranging soft fabrics to soothe my fever shattered every preconceived notion I had about him. "Nicholas," I whimpered, as he carefully tucked one of his heavy, unwashed hoodies around my shoulders. The scent of ozone and dark coffee immediately grounded my racing pulse. "I've got you," he rasped, pressing a cold, damp cloth to my forehead. "I'm not going to touch you, Harper. Not like this. Just breathe. Let the chemicals flush out. You're safe." I survived the night only because of his steady, grounding presence. But our fragile sanctuary was violently breached the very next morning. I was sipping water in the kitchen wrapped in Nicholas's oversized hoodie when the private elevator chimed. The heavy steel doors slid open, and Arthur Russo stepped into the penthouse, flanked by two massive alpha bodyguards, and Cecilia Hastings, a stunning, perfectly manicured Omega who reeked of expensive synthetic roses. Nicholas, who had been resting his eyes on the sofa, was on his feet in a fraction of a second. A roar tore from his throat, a sound so purely feral and territorial that the bulletproof glass of the penthouse windows seemed to vibrate. "How did you bypass the biometric lock?" Nicholas snarled, positioning his massive frame directly between me and the intruders. Arthur Russo smoothed the lapels of his tailored suit, his face a mask of cold fury. "I built this building, Nicholas. Did you really think you could lock me out of my own property?" "And for what?" Arthur's piercing gaze snapped to me, his nose wrinkling in disgust. "For a charity case beta who smells like cheap cedar. The board is furious. You missed the merger meeting this morning. Get out!" Nicholas's voice was a lethal whisper. The air pressure in the room dropped. His alpha aura flared so aggressively that Cecilia stumbled backward, clutching her throat in distress. "You are coming with me, Nicholas," Arthur commanded. "You will sign the bonding contract with Cecilia today, and we will handle this mess. My guards will escort Mr. Jane back to whatever slum he crawled out of. If he speaks a word of this, I'll ensure he never attends college in this country." One of the bodyguards stepped forward, reaching towards me. He never made it. Nicholas moved faster than my eyes could track. He grabbed the bodyguard's outstretched wrist, twisting it with a sickening crack, and shoved the massive man back into his partner. The sheer violence of the act froze the room. Nicholas stood over them, his chest heaving, his canines fully descended, a physical manifestation of an alpha ready to kill for his mate. "If you ever reach for him again," Nicholas growled the vibration, shaking the floorboards, "I will throw you off this balcony. Both of you." Arthur stepped back, genuine shock cracking his stoic facade. "Nicholas, have you lost your mind over a random schoolboy?" "He isn't random." I yelled the words, tearing from my throat before I could stop them. My sudden outburst surprised even me. My chest was heaving, my own Omega instincts, finally clawing their way through the fog of withdrawal. I stepped out from behind Nicholas's broad back. I was terrified, shaking in my oversized hoodie, but the thought of these people taking Nicholas away from me triggered a fierce, protective rage I didn't know I possessed. Nicholas looked back at me, his dark eyes softening for a fraction of a second before hardening as he faced his father. "He's right," Nicholas said coldly. "He isn't random. And this isn't your property anymore, Arthur. Yesterday I finalized the transfer of my trust fund to an offshore account. I sold my shares in Russo Industries to the rival board members. I bought this penthouse in cash under an LLC you can't touch. I am no longer part of your empire, and I am definitely not marrying Cecilia." Cecilia gasped, covering her mouth, while Arthur turned a deep, mottled shade of red. "You threw away your legacy for a freak accident." "It wasn't an accident," Nicholas said, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. My biology recognized him the second he walked into that equipment room. The scent mark only woke me up. "Now get out of my home, Arthur, before I call the police and have you arrested for breaking and entering." Arthur stared at his son, realizing he had entirely lost control of his greatest asset. With a disgusted scoff, he turned on his heel. "You'll regret this, Nicholas, when the fever breaks and you realize you ruined your life for a nobody." The elevator doors slid shut, taking the toxic intruders away. As the metallic click echoed through the room, the adrenaline that had been propping me up vanished. A massive wave of heat crashed over me, not the dull ache of the suppressants, but the real, terrifyingly powerful crash of a natural Omega heat. My knees gave out. Nicholas caught me before I hit the marble floor. "Harper," he breathed, scooping me up into his arms like I weighed nothing. His scent enveloped me, sharp and desperately needed. "Nicholas, it hurts," I sobbed, burying my face into his neck. The scent gland on his jaw, the one I had bruised days ago, pulsed against my lips. He carried me swiftly to the master bedroom, laying me gently in the center of the massive bed. He didn't press his advantage. He backed away, gripping the doorframe, his knuckles turning white. "I can call Dr. Aris. I can get you ethical suppressants, Harper. I won't touch you if you don't want this. You don't owe me anything just because I stood up to my father." Through the haze of the heat, I looked at the alpha who had terrified the whole school, the man who had just dismantled his entire billionaire legacy just to keep me safe. He wasn't a monster. He was a protector who had been trapped in a cage of his own, just waiting for someone to claim him. "I don't want the pills," I whispered, reaching my trembling hand out toward him. "I want you. Please, Nicholas. Don't leave me." The last thread of his restraint snapped. Nicholas crossed the room in 2 massive strides, his weight dipping the mattress as he crawled over me. His hands were unbelievably gentle as they framed my flushed face. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice breaking a single tear escaping his dark eyes. "Once I bite you, Harper, once I officially claim you, I am never letting you go. You will be mine entirely. I'm already yours," I answered, tilting my head to bare my neck to him. "Mark me." When his teeth finally sank into the sensitive flesh of my scent gland, it wasn't pain that flooded my system, but an overwhelming, blinding wave of completeness. The bond snapped into place, tying our souls together with an unbreakable golden thread. His ozone and coffee scent mixed flawlessly with my cedar and honey, creating a new singular fragrance that filled the room. We spent the next 4 days locked in that bedroom, letting the heat run its natural, intense course, learning every inch of each other's bodies and minds. 2 weeks later, the doors of St. Jude's Academy swung open. The bustling hallway fell dead silent. I walked in, no longer the invisible sickly beta hiding in the shadows. I walked with my head held high, the vivid, healing bite mark on my neck completely visible. Beside me, his hand resting possessively but gently on the small of my back, was Nicholas Russo. He wore a clean uniform, his demeanor calm, the feral, dangerous edge completely gone, replaced by the quiet confidence of a fully satisfied, bonded alpha. The whispers erupted like wildfire around us, but I didn't care. Toby dropped his books in shock as we walked past, and Coach Miller actually choked on his coffee. They thought I had accidentally stumbled into a nightmare. They thought the school's most feared alpha had dragged me into his web to punish me. But as Nicholas leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to my temple in the middle of the crowded hallway, I knew the truth. I didn't accidentally mark a monster. I woke up a king, and in return, he gave me his kingdom. Wow, what a wild ride. From a terrifying locker room, mistake to taking down a toxic billionaire empire, Harper and Nicholas proved that sometimes fate has a crazy way of bringing true mates together. What did you think of Nicholas's ultimate sacrifice for Harper? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this intense Omegaverse drama, please hit that like button, share this story with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more thrilling, heart-pounding romances. See you in the next video.